In this demonstration, we're going to walk through how to build a more advanced form. If you actually haven't checked out the basic version of form building, I highly recommend watching that one first before you watch this one, and then this one will kind of get into some of those deeper features within the form builder. So I actually have a PDF downloaded here from OSHA that is actually just their sample confined space permit that you can download off their website. What we'll do is we'll create this in an electronic format on our site so that we can start capturing that data over time. So I will do a split screen here. And what we're going to do is go ahead and go into our form builder here by clicking New Form. For the form name, I'm just going to type in the exact same name. So this one's going to be the confined space entry permit. If you need that form description as well, you can type that in, what folder it gets housed under. Typically, when I am building, I do keep it hidden in forms so that people can't fill it out while I'm building it out. But if you plan to kind of build it out in one session, you really don't need to hide it. You can just leave it as is. And then I'm going to skip all this other details because it actually doesn't apply to this particular form I'm building. So now we kind of just go through and determine what kind of fields we need. So some of these will be text boxes, some of them will be selectable options with yes and no, some of them will be date fields, that type of thing. So we'll just kind of start building it out here from scratch. So we're going to add a new field here. We're going to choose a text box option for them to type in the location, description, and ID number, and hit create here. And then now you can see it creates that text box. Then now I'm going to do a date field over here. So we're going to do a date and time selection. And then we'll just copy and paste that in there and click create. And now we have a date field. The next part is the purpose of entry. That is going to be, again, a little type in field or a text box that they can type that data into. So you'll actually see the most used options are kind of the top 4 here that most people use. So here we'll choose that text box again. And then one thing to note is you'll see it's a single line. If you need more information for them to type additional data or as much as they need to, you can click edit on this field. And then on every single field, most of them are going to have the general tab, the visibility tab, where you can hide it based off of a certain condition above or a certain selection above, and advanced settings for just different little random things you can do within the forms, and then certain settings that apply to certain field types. So that's where you're going to click in the settings, and feel free to peruse around those settings tab to see which each one offers. In this case, if I don't want it a single line, I can make that a paragraph option. You can see I can also make it numbers if I need to. And then that's going to widen that up from that single line to a paragraph option here. Then you'll see we need time in and time out. So we're going to add another date and time field. One thing with the time fields, you will need to actually edit this one as well, and then change the settings on this, because currently the date field only captures the date. So if we're talking about a time field, you will need to toggle this one to no, and then this one to yes, so it's capturing the time. What's also nice is once you kind of have that field created, let me open this up just a little bit wider here so I can see my drop downs here. So this is actually what I was looking for. So once we kind of already have that time set and not the date set, we can actually just click the white drop down arrow and now duplicate this field with those same settings in its entirety. So if we did time out and I click edit on the settings here, you're going to see it's automatically tagged to my time, and the date is automatically toggled off, which is a great feature to duplicate that. So we're going to do the permit canceled time. So we'll go ahead and just duplicate that again. And then if they cancel it, we're going to ask again for that type in option for them to type in the reason why that permit was canceled. Again, if you want to just make sure that they have enough room, just toggle that paragraph style and that'll give them additional options, just making sure I'm not missing anything over there. The next one is the supervisor. So to tie that back to your employee list or your users housed in your list, if you didn't want it to be a type in option, you can do that select option here. Type in the supervisor title, create that field, and then on the settings tab again is where you can toggle that source to your employees. So if I choose my source to my employees, that's going to toggle it to my employees, and then they would be able to select the supervisor from my users currently loaded in the site. So the next portion is this special requirements, rescue and emergency services. Looks like that's actually something they're going to write in that detail. So we'll give them another text box to type in that information. And then now we're going to the hazards here. So actually I'm going to go ahead and create what's called a heading for this, and then it will create a nice blocked off section to kind of continue this on. So now we could create our questions here for yes, no. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new field here, do the selectable option, enter in our title, click create, or you could hit enter on your keyboard if you want it to be faster. Again, if you need anything mandatory as well to where they cannot submit the form without filling in all the required details, you can also check this box here, and that will make that a required field, and they can't submit the form. It will say, oops, please correct the errors in red, and then once they scroll up, any field that's marked mandatory that they didn't fill in would toggle them in red so that they can see that. On the settings tab, typically if it's a couple of selections, I typically recommend not more than 5 using the rating style. So you'll see when you use the select box, it's actually that drop down option. If you use a rating style, it goes left to right with big boxes. And then when you do the list option, it goes up and down with a radio option button. So feel free to play around with the styles when you're using that select field. I typically try to lean on a rating or the list as much as I can if it's a few options, because then it's one less click for the user having to select the drop-down menu and then select the option. So rating is really great for yes, no, NA, pass, fail, any of those type of options that you're creating. So here we can type yes, and then we're just going to add another item to type no. And if you even needed that NA option, you can just add another option and just type in NA. Another thing that's really great and doesn't really apply in a confined space entry permit, but if you're talking about an inspection, you can score these. And we technically recommend a score for 1 as the positive, and whatever is the negative answer would get 0, and then NA stays NA. And then to toggle that scoring to come into play with a point score and an overall percentage, you just make sure you scroll back up to the top, and this is where that scoring, make sure that you show it on the form. So there's kind of 2 toggles, setting up the select fields and then toggling on the scoring. In this case, I'm not going to score my options here. I'm just going to leave them as is and actually remove this NA option. And then as another thing, if you wanted to color code, feel free to color code. We sometimes, again, pass, fail. Pass would be green, fail would be red. So feel free to play around with those little droppers as well if you need to. So now we've got our yes, no options. Once I click done here, you'll actually see that radio button now. So that's what the radio button looks like. And again, once we kind of have this already set up how we need it to, it's a real easy toggle to duplicate this field as many times as we need to. It will let you allow it to duplicate it up to 50 times, but after that, you would just need to reset and then do another 50. So we'll just actually go through and quickly type out or copy and paste all of our questions here. A little bit of tediousness here, but not too bad. Once you get it all created, it's ready to go. And then you can start capturing data on these questions. And becomes electronic format from there. Whoops, I forgot toxic, so we'll just do that. Toxic items, etc. So I'll leave it at that so that I don't make you watch all that tediousness. So then once you're ready for the next section, you can kind of do the same thing, but let's block it out again by that nice heading so that it just doesn't flow in a big long list of yes, no questions they have to go through. So For the special requirements, we'll create that heading field here, type in the special requirements and create that field. And now it gives us a nice section right here. We can go ahead and duplicate one of these. And then we can just quickly drag and drop this wherever we need to. So if you ever need to kind of move anything, it's a real easy toggle by clicking on the wording and then dragging and dropping it where you need to go. Additionally, if it was a large form, you can do the move option. So sometimes I'll use this if it's a really large form and I need to move it all the way to the bottom or all the way to the top, vice versa. You can click this drop down option for move and then pop it right back up to the top of the form accordingly from there if you needed to. So I'll go ahead and move this back down here, right there. And then now you can see we have our next section created here to kind of continue on with our additional questions. I will go ahead and show you how to do an other option here. So if you did have an other option and they're clicking yes or no, and you want them to list out what that other option is, what you can do in this case is go ahead and create that text field and say list other, and then create it. And then this is where the visibility options come into play. So if you wanted to hide it accordingly, you can say, so if they say no, there's no additional special requirements under other, you don't need this to show, but if they select yes, then you want them to list this other option in a text field. So that's where the visibility tab is super useful. So you'll actually add a condition here. Then you'll actually see anything that's a selectable option within the form. So obviously text fields, since anything can be typed in, we can't trigger a condition based off of that. But anything that we create as a selectable option, we can toggle that question, and then it says only show this field when other is any of the following, and then we'll toggle it to when it's yes. The last part is you'll need to click continue. If you forget to hit continue and you hit done, it actually won't save your changes. So you will want to make sure that you hit continue and make sure that you see the screen like this, where it says only shown when other is yes, and now you can hit done. Another thing that's super useful in form building is that preview option. It will allow you to toggle those options and see what it looks like from the user's perspective. So if you want to go through and toggle the yes, no options, make sure everything's working properly, as well as make sure that your text box is opening accordingly when you select yes versus no. You could kind of play around with the options. Another great thing is it allows you to even submit it in an edit view so that you can see what it would look like on a response side without actually submitting a true report on your site. And then you can pop right back into your editor and kind of continue to make your changes accordingly if you saw anything was incorrect. So now we'll go on to the next section. So very similar, you would just do the same thing for special equipment here. We'll create a new field for the heading for special equipment and click create, and now we have that nice heading there. If I duplicate my question again, I can just quickly do that and have that ready to go and just drag and drop it down to my section. And now I could create the additional questions I need. So if I needed to create, 5 or 6 more, I can create that, bump that up, and then start creating all my questions accordingly. Pipelines, just do lighting, PPE, and fire extinguisher. What's also nice is you could see once I hit this option, if I don't need any additional questions, I can just click in the background and it gets rid of that screen. And now I'm at the bottom of my form here. So now the next part is communication procedures. That would probably be a text field that they type in. So we're just going to add a new text box here, create that field. And then we'll also, on the settings tab, give them that paragraph option so that they could type in as much as they need to. So this is a next great section to kind of walk through. We do have an option for if you have a set number of fields that need to open up every single time, we can create that on what's called a counter field. So for example, if they need to be taking multiple times of the oxygen levels, the LEL, carbon monoxide, so forth, we can create this on a counter field to where every time that they click the plus button, it's going to drop open these number sets of fields every time. So now I'm just going to create a heading for this little section here. And then I'm going to create a new field called the counter field. Actually, let me back up. I'm going to create first the other fields that would be first. So for example, we're going to do percent of oxygen that they would be typing in. And then typically, if you had those permissible limits, what I usually do for that is just kind of putting it in parentheses, whoops, that it's 19.5% to 23.5%. And at least that way they kind of have that gauge if they need to, or if you needed to, you could create a description field to kind of show that data. I'll show that as well in just a moment. So we'll go ahead and create this text box. And then to set these up on the counter field, we do have to create an option on the Advanced tab to hide it on the form. And then what you're going to see happen once I click done here is it actually grays it out. This allows us to connect all the fields that are grayed out back to a counter field. So I'll show you the whole process in just a moment. So let me duplicate this for the percent of LEL, the carbon monoxide, and the hydrogen sulfide, and if they had any other gas. I'll just call it other, that's fine. Now the next part is obviously we want the test start and stop time as well. So we'll go ahead and add a couple more fields for the date and time, test start time. And then we do want to make sure that that is toggled to that time field instead of just the date. And then again, we need to hide this field just as our text fields were. And then now we can do the test stop time. And then the last part of this now is creating the counter field. So once we create the counter field, you'll actually see we can do number of atmospheric tests. And then once we get this created on the settings tab, you're actually going to see right here the option to add those subfields. So once you add a subfield here, you're actually going to see that drop down for the start time and all of those that we have hidden. What ends up happening is if you forget to hide those on the advanced settings here, so it kind of walks you through it here in light gray saying hide the field in the advanced settings tab, otherwise it will not show in this drop down as an option. So if you don't see it there, that's kind of the next step. Go back to that field, hide it on form so that it is grayed out like these ones are showing, and now you can connect it back to your counter field. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for every single one of my fields, and then it will make more sense once I show you on the preview version what this counter field does exactly. So let me get these added and we'll show you what that looks like in action. So now that I have all my fields set, I can click done. And what this allows is a great option for them while they're filling it out to say every time that they have an atmospheric test, they will just come click the plus button as many times as they need to, and it automatically puts all of those fields again 3 times. So start time, stop time, oxygen, all the way down to other, then another set of number 2 for start time, stop time, oxygen, and so forth, and then another set for set 3. So really just allows them to toggle up as many times as they need to if they have rows of data that you're capturing that are going to be kind of those same set number of fields. The counter field is a great option for this to kind of toggle through. So now that we have that set up, we'll scroll back to the bottom of our form. And we need the names of person doing testing. So very similarly, if you wanted to tie that back to your employee list, there is a toggle to allow them to choose multiple users. So on the settings tab, you'll choose your source back to that employee list, and then you're going to choose this setting for user may choose multiple. That will allow them to choose multiple names in the dropdown, allowing them to choose the names of the people who were testing that data. The next one is the instruments used, the date of last calibrated. So I'd actually probably split these out. I would probably most likely do the text field for everything except for the date it was last calibrated, because we can actually do a nice text field for that. So we can go ahead and have them type in the instrument name, model, and serial number, but let's go ahead and trigger them to use our date field for the date it was last calibrated. Nothing wrong with giving them an option to type it in here, but this will just give you another filter on the back end if you needed to see any of those data points of when it was last calibrated. And then now let me zoom out on this page just a little bit here. So now we're talking about just text fields for the ventilation. And I'll go back to my split screen here. So very easy, just kind of tedious repetition of this is going to be a text box, this is going to be a select field, this is going to be a time field. So pre-entry time would probably be a date and time field again. So we'll create that and change that to time on the settings again. Click done. And then central notified, we can say, instead of creating this as two separate checkboxes, what we could do is just have a select field and say notification and create that. And then our two options for rating or list style, I'll show you the list style, is actually going to be central notified before and after. And then now you've got that radio option with the list here. And then you can do a time notified. So the last portion here is authorized entrance, authorized attendance. So if you did need them to sign off in any sort of fashion, you could create that as that counter field as well. So for example, if you just needed a counter field for them to choose their name and then sign off and then tag the date and time they signed, you can create a counter field for that. So you can say number of authorized entrants. And then actually, I'm not going to be able to set up my counter field completely yet. So we'll actually do entrant name here for the select field tied back to your employee list. So our source here becomes employee list. And then we just need to remember to hide this on the form in the advanced settings. Then the next portion is if we want a signature, that's actually going to be our sketch field. And then you can just type this in as signature here. And then on the setting tab for this one, we do have a signature line as well. So then same deal, you can hide on form in the advanced settings and it grays it out. And then if you wanted a date and time punch clock for when they date, time, signed, you can create both of those options for date and time and make it a punch clock to where they can't actually pick the time. It captures what they currently select on there. And then lastly, don't forget to do the hide on form option and click done. And then now I can connect this back to my counter field again. You'll actually see anything that is hidden is going to show again. So we'll do entrance name and just toggle that one. Make sure you're toggling the right signature and then the right date and time signed. Additionally, if you just wanted them to choose the name of the authorized entrance or something, or attendance or something like that, you can do that choose multiple option if you don't need them to sign off in any sort of fashion. So just change that source to your employee list and then give them that toggle to choose multiple at that point. And then that would allow them to choose multiple. The last part is if you wanted to kind of give them a checkbox to, like as the certification here, that's kind of a handy one. If you want to use the checkbox option, you just type in the title and it looks a little bit different on the field settings. When you're previewing it here, you can see we've got our form starting to build out here with our different sections that they need to complete, the atmospheric pressure testing, anything notifications, those entrants as needed. If they needed to choose multiple authorized attendants, if you wanted to go that route. And then you can see my checkbox for certification here. Another thing you can do with that certification, if you just have straight text, is this nice description field. So this will also allow you to just kind of copy and paste that text in there to show that on the form as well if you needed to, and it's just a straight text option. Additionally, you can attach a file too. So if you had an image of maybe the confined space that you wanted to attach here or show a little bit more instructions or a diagram, you can use that description field as well to attach photos and kind of give more information. What's great on the preview mode is it does give a little thumbnail, but they can open it wide screen here and see the full picture and then close it out and go back to the form accordingly. So the last part of the form is actually them signing off. So you can have a completed by section for the employee filling out the form. Just note that whoever is forming or filling out the form will actually tag on that form response automatically. So it does capture who's logged in automatically, the date of their device, and their map location as long as they allow it. So we can also create that signature for them to sign off, and then now we can basically save our form at this point. So I'm actually going to get rid of that, and we could save our form. So one thing I did mention at the beginning of the demonstration is that if you hide it, it does remove that fill out option for your users. So if you do need to unhide that once you're ready to make it live to your users, you would just click edit here and then uncheck that box to make it unhidden and save your changes. And now it becomes available for them to fill out. And then once they fill out, all that response data gets housed right here on your responses page. So here we could kind of look at how that looks like in a live version here. And if I did scroll all the way down, you'll actually see that true submit button that would actually submit that into my responses. Again, if you do have any questions regarding the form building, feel free to reach out to our support team at support@kpaehs.com.